Chapter 3. Zara had been surprised by the nuclear detonations. The pirate fleet had been following out of sight of the short-range scanner, but their aid in killing the Reaper was welcome. The question was if they were friend or foe. McKinley's voice came for the intercom. "We have an incoming transmission from the pirate fleet. Let's hear it, Lieutenant. This is Captain Kaimas of the Omega Vengeance. We're here to help. This is Captain Ayers of the SSV Ain Jalut, and since when are pirates so noble, I will not lie. We were here to get payback for that chunk of Omega that was stolen, but now it's or the Reapers, so that mission is out the window." Zara and Rodriguez exchanged looks. They both knew that they would need all the help they could get. "Okay, Captain, you're with us now." "Understood, Wheel." There was a pause as Kaimas spoke to somebody. "Captain, we have Reaper company at the edge of scanner range." "I see them." "Time to go, Captain." Ain Jalut and her new acquired fleet continued their trek into the shell as Avenger, and 4 more Reapers came into range. Amel, Valkyrie. By the time Farker reached the site of Tiger's death, all that remained of the Reaper was a burned-out husk. They killed a Reaper. The ones who survived aren't going to like that. But Farka didn't care. She wanted the Reapers to lose. She wanted to life. Part of her told her to turn around. Here she was, in an outdated ship, chasing Reapers. But there were people fighting for everybody's survival. And she would make sure that their stories were not forgotten. Be brave, Tyla, be brave. She sailed past the Reaper corpse and kept going. SSV Ain Jalut. Zara was still watching the scanners in CIC. "Zoe, report. We've reached the first asteroid belt. Still only 5 Reaper signatures. I've logged our first kill in the logs, ma'am. The fleet is holding a tight formation, Skipper. We're passing through at full speed." "But the Reapers are slowing down. Our data is a couple of days old. Theirs is from 50,000 years ago and with the camouflage system turned off, ma'am," Harris said, doing his job as navigator. "Time to get through, Lieutenant." 15 minutes for us. At least 24 minutes for them. Good. Anything else to report, Zoe? The oxygen tanks from sickbay have been installed in the RCS fuel bay, and the oxygen plant is working at full capacity, so refuel should be complete in 43 minutes. Also, Captain Kaimas has several spare tanks for sickbay. He's offered to shuttle them over once we clear the belt. "Do it," Zara said. "We'll need sickbay at full capacity." Zara looked at the clock. These were going to be 15 very long minutes. SSV Orizaba. Orizaba's CIC was organized chaos. The Reapers were everywhere and messages were flying to and fro all over the place. Private Hank Lewis was one of several people running messages to Admiral Hackett. "Admiral, we have a status update on our Normandy-class frigates," he said, while brushing sweaty, black hair from his green eyes. "Ain Jalut has asked for reinforcement. Elalamine and Verdun are going to her aid, sir." He handed Hackett an electronic pad with the full report. Both ships had been on a shakedown cruise with skeleton crews when the Reapers invaded. "Are there any other ships responding?" 4, Admiral, a Turian cruiser, 2 Asari cruisers, and the MSV Bellerophon. "A civilian ship is riding into a battle deliberately?" "Yes, sir. That's what the report says, sir." "Thank you, Private. Dismissed." Hackett got the feeling that even with ships coming to her aid, Ain Jalut would be in a fight for her life. SSV Ain Jalut. They had cleared the belt and gotten the oxygen tanks aboard. After passing through the xenon layer, they were back to the helium part of the shell. McKinley was keeping an eye on the fleet, but they were still with the Ain Jalut. The problem was that the helium was a lot more stable than the outer shell, which meant that the Reapers would be able to fire their laser if they could within range of the fleet. "Great, no pressure," McKinley said, but he knew that this was a do-or-die situation. As he did his thing, Rodriguez entered the bridge. Besides McKinley, Lieutenant Taylor and Lieutenant Mbeki were the only other 2 people in the room. Taylor was on the sensors. Mbeki was monitoring the ship's heat level. "How are we doing here?" "Still staying ahead of the bad guys so far, Commander," McKinley said. "Heat levels stable, no malfunctions on the board, sir." Mbeki added. "Good," Rodriguez said. "Any additional Reaper signatures?" "No, still reading 5 Reapers, sir," Taylor said. "Keep it up. Rodriguez said. He gave them a nod and headed back to CIC, where Harris was running things. Ayers had left to see how things were going on the other decks. Zara had checked up on sickbay. Dr. Tilos had everything under control, so she was moving on to the cargo bay. The shuttle from Omega Vengeance had already gone back to her mothership. Zhukov was overseeing things as the ship's Marines were getting ready for action. "How are we doing, Chief?" "We're getting ready, Captain. If they want a fight, we'll give it to them, ma'am." "Good. Because the one reason there aren't any Reaper troop transports out there is because they don't know about the colony yet, and as soon as they do..." Zhukov nodded. He had been granted access to Shepard's reports. The Reapers zombified people into ground troops. These were called husks, but Zhukov didn't doubt that the process would also work on other species, and each species would create its own variant of monster. Hell is coming to New Rannoch. And we're going to make sure they're ready for it. "Aye, Captain." She gave him a nod and continued on her tour. Chapter 4. The trip through the helium layer had been 40 minutes of nail-biting tension, but McKinley had kept the fleet out of the Reaper's crosshairs. And this time, the passage through the second belt would be a lot easier. Zara had returned to CIC after talking to Sanders in engineering. "Friendly dreadnoughts ahead," Rodriguez said. 1 minute till passage. The ghosts had created a passage for friendly ship. "Get us through into FTL, tell our friends to close the door behind us." "Transmitting now, Skipper." As the fleet passed through the asteroid belt, the passage was swarmed by mines behind them. They had been stored in shipping containers that were attached to the asteroids. "Time to unleash our next surprise," Harris said. "The ones the pirates had didn't do enough damage," Zara said. "Let's hope ours do more." New Rannoch's defense grid included 140 missiles. They had warheads that the locals called Mark 42, but a check of their inventory had revealed that there were 33 older warheads gathered dust in storage. Fortunately for Zara, Chief Zhukov was a big fan of old science fiction shows. Taking ideas from 2 shows called Babylon 5 and Stargate SG-1, he had come up with Operation Sheridan. The nuclear warheads had been placed on the asteroid with the highest percentage of element 0. Those asteroids had been moved around to create a gauntlet. If things worked as planned, the EZO would increase the size of the explosion the warheads would create. Finally, the fleet reached the other side of the fleet. As fleet jumped into FTL, now 2 dreadnoughts stronger, the Reapers began their own trip through the belt. Avenger led the group through the belt. He was angry these puny beings had killed Tiger, and they kept running. But Avenger knew that it was only a matter of time before they would be cornered, and then they would be crushed. Avenger was still thinking on how much pain he would make them experience when the first nuclear warhead exploded. All 33 Operation Sheridan warheads exploded. The element 0 did exactly what Zhukov hoped it would. It made the explosions much bigger. They created waves of energy that hit the Reapers. At first, all of them seemed fine, but then space itself seemed to ripple. It snapped back into place, and energy flooded the area. Avenger and 2 of the Reapers made it out, but the other 2 were too slow. They were hit again and again. Until the energy faded, and one of the Reapers was dead, while another was badly wounded, which made Avenger roar internally. And then he noticed the colony. It took only a fraction of a second for him to identify the colony as Quarians. There was no information on this colony on his star charts. But they would still put it to good use. Avenger sent a message to Typhoon, the Reaper that had been damaged. Typhoon turned and headed back towards the perimeter. He would heal and summon troop transports. The Quarian colony would be harvested. In Sick, Zara and Rodriguez watched the Reaper go. The belt was currently beyond the edge of their sensor range, but the mines had sensors of their own. Jalut had dropped several communications buoys between the belt and New Rannoch. These boosted the original Ghost system and gave the Alliance ship access as well. "Going for the troop transports?" Rodriguez asked. "Going for the troop transports," Zara said. "On the bright side, our communications can't penetrate the shell, and I figure this means that theirs can't either. It brings us one step closer to leveling the playing field. Still, Their chances of winning were far from good. Amel, Valkyrie. Farka didn't see the Reaper until it was practically on top of her. One moment she was cruising through a massive layer of helium, the next she was dodging a very angry Reaper. She knew it was angry because it was shooting at her. But so far, she had managed to dodge its fire. She wasn't complaining, but she knew it should have been impossible. Traveling at the speed of light, the laser beam should have vaporized her in one shot. Checking her scanners, she saw that the lens of the Reaper's energy weapon was damaged. She activated the log recorder. This is Tyla Farka of the AML Valkyrie. I'm about to try something stupid. If you find this, tell my parents that I love them. And tell my sister Hera that I only trust her to take care of Tommy. She'll know what it means, Farka out. Turning the recorder off, she launched the Valkyrie's emergency buoy. Then she turned the Valkyrie towards the Reaper. The ship bobbed and weaved as the Reaper shot at her. Come on, come on, come on. Valkyrie was not a big ship. She was meant to have a crew of 6 and carry 10 passengers. To be able to evacuate 16 people, she had 4 escape pods with each having room for 4 people. The model Valkyrie carried traveled at 20% of light speed, with one exception. Escape pods launched in a pinch, so they left at 25% to clear any trouble. Almost there. She put the ship through a wild turn. Now, she pressed a big red button and the starboard pods launched. The Reaper managed to blast one of the pods, but the other hit it in the eye and exploded. While the Reaper was blinded, Farka slammed the proper buttons to launch one of the port escape pods. It curved around the ship and also hit the Reaper in its eye. Something crucial failed, and the Reaper's weapon exploded. Seconds later, the Reaper itself went up. Farka had a few seconds to be happy to be alive before the pressure wave hit. The ship groaned, and things exploded in other rooms. Farka barely made it into the last escape pod. Time to go, Tyla. She launched the escape pod, and it headed deeper into the nebula. Then Valkyrie exploded, and the world went black. SSV Ain. Jalut. Zara looked at New Rannoch. They had reached the planet in mere minutes. Why didn't they chase us at FTL speed? Harris said. Because they don't know that we don't have any more tricks between the belt and New Rannoch, Rodriguez said. Not to mention they're wiping out a galaxy. They are not in a rush, Lieutenant. McKinley, get us down to the surface, Zara said. We need to get the chief and his team down there. Aye, Captain, McKinley said over the intercom. Ain Jalut entered the atmosphere, but she didn't go alone. The pirate fleet launched 11 shuttles. Each was loaded with as much troops as the ships could spare. New Rannoch had an army, but they were unexperienced, so the fleet was sending down as many people as they could. There was also the local police, who were getting as many people as they could into shelters and getting ready to defend those. As for the ground-to-orbit cannons, those were being defended by the new Rannoch Navy. It was also the Navy that ran the nuclear missile sites. Finally, the Air Force ran the planet's anti-aircraft guns. All of this went through Zara's head as they approached the park they had landed in before. There was a thud as the ship touched down. As the cargo bay door opened, the shuttles caught up and joined Ain Jalut. Deploying ground forces now, Skipper. Zara nodded. As soon as everybody had disembarked from the shuttles, they headed back into space to wait for all hell to break loose. Chapter 5. Escape Pod 1. Farka woke with a splitting headache. She managed to find the first aid kit. There was a small mirror in a corner of the escape pod, which allowed her to study her face. A large cut ran across her forehead. Well, that explains the headache. She set to treating the wound, and the pain slowly started to fade. That done, she looked out the pod's only window. Crap, this is not good. The escape pod was heading into an asteroid belt. Worse, she could see that said belt was mined. Looking around the pod, she realized that she was upside down. The pod was a cylinder with a bench facing a control panel. There were cabinets full of supplies above and underneath the bench. Farka sat down on the bench and strapped herself in using a seatbelt. Okay, next crisis. The pod was on autopilot. She left the computer in charge of the course and activated the pod's sensors before activating the emergency beacon. This might attract the wrong kind of attention. But she had no idea of what was inside this nebula and how long it might take the pod to reach someplace safe. So it was a gamble she was willing to make. Finally, she turned off the autopilot. Goddess, help me. She began weaving the pod through the belt. Shelter Gamma 1. Olaf led the way into the shelter. Located underneath a school, it was a honeycomb of chambers connected by a corridor that sloped down slowly. They had wanted to stay aboard the Jalut, but Dr. Telos had made it crystal clear that they needed to go down to New Rannoch. Not only would they be safer, she had given them an assignment. We'll write reports on the space battle. Chief Zhukov will be outside the shelters, but we'll need a report from inside as well. And you still have to finish that report Lieutenant Harris asked you to write, she had said. So they had packed their books and supplies, but so far there was not much to write. They reached the end of the corridor. Olaf picked a door and they entered one of the rooms. It looks like a hotel room, Olaf said, except there's no windows. The room had 2 beds, table with 4 chairs and a small kitchen. A single door led to a bathroom with a toilet and a shower. Let's get to work. It'll help pass the time, Aaron said. Olaf nodded and they began unpacking. SSV Ain. Jalut. The clock was down to 3 minutes. Everybody was ready for the fight. Here they come, Rodriguez said, looking at the CIC monitors. McKinley? Ready, Commander, just give the word, sir. Not yet, Lieutenant. Zara watched from near the galaxy map. Rodriguez was to her left, while Harris was to the right. They waited until the clock reached 1 minute. Now, McKinley? McKinley didn't answer, but the ship bolted as he threw the ship into an evasive maneuver. At the same time, the rest of the fleet also started dodging the Reapers. All the ships opened fire, with the planetary defense cannons also joining in. There had been 3 functional units when they had arrived, but there had been a 4th unit that had been broken. Sanders and her engineers had managed to get it working. The problem had turned out to be the targeting computer. Instead of fixing the computer, they had built a replacement from spare parts. As the Reapers got closer to the planet, the missile silos also opened fire. The missiles couldn't damage the Reapers directly, but detonated around the giant creatures instead. This created electromagnetic pulses that the Quarians hoped would blind the attackers. It's not working, Harris said. The Reapers continued towards the planet. Soon, they would be in range of the anti-aircraft cannons. The lasers aren't doing much damage either, Rodriguez said. Zara suppressed a curse. They were throwing everything they had at the enemy, and it simply wasn't enough. Before she could give her next order, the Reapers opened fire on the planet. At last, the moment Avenger had known would come had arrived. They had cornered these lower beings and were now crushing them like the insect they were. The cannons had been their first target. Now they were burning the largest city. And once the pathetic fleet had been destroyed, it would be a matter of waiting for the troop transports so that the harvest could begin. The fleet continued firing on the Reapers. They were descending through the atmosphere as they unleashed one shot after another. But then the AA guns opened fire. Zara had forgotten about these weapons. Not that she was complaining. And whoever was running the guns clearly had a plan. Instead of targeting all 3 Reapers, they were all targeting one of the behemoths. It was like watching an elephant being attacked by 1,000 mosquitoes, but it worked, especially once the fleet concentrated its fire on that particular Reaper. "It's going down, Skipper," Rodriguez said. There was no sound, but Zara could imagine the thud as the Reaper toppled over. The attack then shifted to one of the 2 remaining Reapers. Avenger's moment of glory had vaporized. He had foolishly underestimated these creatures, but he knew this world would fall. Avenger pulled away from the planet, but kept firing. Then he spotted the ship leading the defense, that accursed frigate that had cost them the collector cruiser. He opened fire on it,